Yeah, I'm ready whenever you are.
Broadcasting live from Forward Observer Central Command in Austin, Texas. It's the man always out front on issues. You're listening to Out Front with Mike Shelby.
Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Out Front. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. It is Thursday, the 21st of April, 2022. Guys, listen, as a reminder, I got an email because someone said I say listen too much. I will work on that. Starting on Monday, this show will be live streamed over at the new YouTube channel and will also be up on a couple other platforms. It's going to be streamed at the Out Front with Mike Shelby channel. It's youtube.com/outfront with Mike Shelby. Also, click on the link in the description of this video, hit subscribe, and then also, if you would, share the link with your family and friends. If you're watching over on the high side right now, or you listen to the podcast version in your early warning feed, Friday is going to be the last day that this streams over on the high side. And I'm doing this because I'm putting my own personal politics and philosophy into this show, and I don't want to blur the lines between what I believe personally and what we do at Forward Observer. We really do our best at Forward Observer. We don't carry the water for any political party, no political organization. We try to be straight shooters, non-biased, tell you exactly what we think, regardless of any kind of influence. And I want Forward Observer to stay that way. So this is why I'm doing this. Now, I noticed that the World Bank is warning that the current and worsening food shortages will probably last into next year. No big surprise there. However, World Bank President David Malpass did say that he was hopeful that the world is going to find solutions as the problem worsens. We're just getting started. And this is a very good reminder. Local, local, local. If this decade is anywhere near as disruptive as I think it could be, and maybe you think it could be, and a lot of other people think it could be, then your job right now is to identify as many local solutions as possible. Self-sufficiency, community resiliency, teamwork, having a preparedness network, a local information sharing network, a network that builds community teamwork at the local level. That is going to be a strategic advantage for you. And I don't think there is a better strategic effort than building a preparedness network. That's why I mention it so frequently. And speaking of strategic advantage, the thing that we're going to talk about today is this speech that Chinese President Xi Jinping gave this morning, our time. And it looks like China is moving towards its solution to global NATO. Global NATO is the colloquial term that some people call this group of the United States, its allies, and security partners all around the world. I think it was last week that I mentioned a senior official from NATO went to visit South Korea, the country, to meet with defense officials there in order to increase interoperability between NATO militaries and South Korean militaries. Also, earlier this month, the South Korean foreign minister went to a NATO meeting in Brussels. So when I talk about global NATO, this is what I'm talking about. It's not just the United States. It's not just NATO. It's the Quad. It's all American security partners all around the world. This is effectively global NATO. That does not sit well with the Chinese, which is why they're now talking about something I'm going to tell you right now. This morning, Chinese President Xi Jinping proposed a new, quote, global security initiative, end quote, during a video speech at an annual conference for Asian countries. Now, during this speech, by the way, I will be posting my show notes for free over on a Patreon channel. If you want to support the show, that's great. Please become a Forward Observer subscriber because we produce the best intelligence over there. Independently of Forward Observer, if you want to support this show, you can go sign up for Patreon, but I'm going to make all my show notes free over there anyway. And I think it's patreon.com/outfront. And I will share the link with you so you can read this speech on your own if you want to. So during this speech, she described new traditional security risks that are emerging, and read that as probably conventional military traditional security risks. She called for indivisible security for countries, and he added that this new initiative, this new global security initiative would, quote, oppose the building of national security on the basis of insecurity in other countries. Western observers largely see this as a comment on Taiwan, this whole concept of an indivisible security. China's one policy, they make very clear. Taiwan is kind of just being a bad child right now, a breakaway region of a one China. Now, this is where this speech gets interesting, because she also said it's important to reject the Cold War mentality. By the way, China continually accuses the United States of living back during the Cold War, bringing back these new Cold War sentiments, new Cold War fears. And China is doing just as much as the United States in this Cold War. They are absolutely keeping this Cold War active and actively growing it. At any rate, they said that they want to they reject the Cold War mentality, oppose unilateralism, and say no to bloc confrontation. This is all directed at the United States. And this is when she says that this new global security initiative should reject bloc confrontation. He's talking about the Eastern and Western blocs, global NATO, and whatever China builds in response. The U.S., the U.S.-led rules-based international order versus this new international order China is trying to build, because this is actually what they're doing right now. And the speech, she makes this very clear in this speech. I'll read some of the speech to you now. He says, quote, "We need to work together to tackle global governance challenges." Now, global governance is very important because I got something else to say on that in just a minute. He continues, "Countries around the world are like passengers aboard the same ship who share the same destiny. The thought of throwing anyone overboard is simply not acceptable." And here he's talking about Russia, the United States trying to throw Russia overboard. He continues, "In this day and age, the international community has evolved so much that it has become a sophisticated and integrated apparatus. Acts to remove any single part will cause serious problems to its operation." End quote. Now, these are shots at the United States. One thing that I've been saying in these shows is that China's new strategic messaging is all of the food disruption, the supply chain disruption post-COVID. First of all, China wants to get over the COVID thing. They don't want to be blamed for COVID. They're trying to shift focus now on the United States because they say, and there is some truth to this, they say that unilateral sanctions against Russia are to blame for all of the things we're going to be experiencing for the rest of this year and into next year. So economic dislocation, supply chain disruption, food and fertilizer disruption. This is not Russia's fault. This is the fault of the United States. This is China's new strategic message. I talked about they have the chairmanship of the BRICS committee this year. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. There's going to be it may be in person this year. It'll at least be virtual, but there's going to be I want to say it's the 14th annual BRICS conference this year. Listen, we're going to hear this plastered. The Chinese are going to plaster the BRICS with this message. Everything bad that's happening right now is due to unilateral American US-led sanctions against Russia. They're going to pound that drum. And this is a whole part of this strategic plan to subvert American influence globally. All right. Now let's get into the next part of this speech here. And I'll just read, unfortunately, I read it to you because there's no video that you would understand. because it's in Chinese. She says, quote, in today's world, unilateralism and excessive pursuit of self-interest are doomed to fail. Again, he's talking about the United States. So are the practices of decoupling decoupling supply disruption and maximum pressure. So are the attempts to forge small circles or to stoke conflict and confrontation along ideological lines. This is not about Asia. This is about the United States. He continues, instead, we need to embrace a global governance philosophy that emphasizes extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits, promote the common values of humanity, and advocate exchanges and mutual learning between civilizations. She is juxtaposing this is his vision for a Chinese-led world order looks like. Not unilateralism, not just America decides what it's going to do and lobbies the world to follow, which is exactly what's happened with Russian sanctions. He says extensive consultation, multi-party consultation. We're going to, according to China, this is going to be a big table, a big family approach, and we're going to decide what we want to do as the world, as opposed to American unilateralism. Again, he's given this speech to countries in Asia, and I'm going to bring this full circle because there is an exclamation point on this. Because in speeches like this, she is making the case for a new Chinese-led world order. She is making the case that China is going to emerge as the new global pace setter. The United States is falling away. Its power and influence in the world are waning. China is going to rise and take the place and usher in this new global world order. And again, this is just the logical conclusion of what she is saying in this speech. This speech is not the words of a country or a national leader who just wants to take part in the international system. He's not just saying, hey guys, I've got maybe some suggestions we can talk about. Let's maybe mull this over and figure out how we can do this better next time. This is a vision for a new global system. And this is absolutely Xi Jinping's plan. Now, on the 12th of April, the 12th April edition of the show, I talked about some similar comments made by the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. And I'll just quote this here. Quote, we will guide the reform of the global governance system with the principle of equity and justice put forth in the BRICS proposals for improving global governance in the post-COVID era. The very next sentence, or maybe a couple sentences later, Wang Yi says, Asia's time has come in global governance. This Asia conference is Xi Jinping's opportunity to provide and promote this alternative to a global NATO, to provide the alternative to a U.S.-led, rules-based international order here. This is something that Xi Jinping, the president of China, this is something he brought up in his speech. He mentioned the Asian miracle, and the Asian miracle is roughly the past 50 years of, I wouldn't say peace, but at least prosperity. And in some of these places, a lot of growth. He's promoting this Asian miracle like some people in the West have promoted the 5,000-year leap. And here's a quote that kind of brings us all together from Xi Jinping here. He says, when Asia fares well, the whole world benefits. And he's telling these Asian countries, we need to prioritize Asian growth, Asian peace, and prosperity. In Asia, well, I'll just quote Wang Yi, Chinese foreign minister, quote, Asia's time has come in global governance, end quote. Now, he called on what he called the Asian bloc to do three things. And these appear to be critical for his strategic vision. Number one, safeguard peace in Asia. Okay, like no more wars involving Asian countries against each other. Safeguard the peace in Asia. Presumably, that means getting South Korea, getting some of these other, Japan, the Philippines, getting some of these other Asian countries to not dissuade, but to not be influenced by the United States over Taiwan. Xi Jinping is making it very clear to these Asian countries, Taiwan is simply China. Don't go to war with us over China. Don't go to war with us over Taiwan. The second thing he asks is, he says the Asian bloc has to, quote, vigorously advance Asian cooperation. So this is not just, this is military, economic, international, diplomatic cooperation to stand together as an Asian bloc to resist American influence. Remember, America's going away. China is going to be at the lead of this new international system. You don't want to go against China. You're not going to get your way, and you're going to be punished. That's kind of the unspoken part of this. And then number 3, jointly promote Asian unity. So all this together this really builds on what I talked about with the China's, I forget exactly what the title of the show was, but it's basically how the show is all about how China is going to use the BRICS countries and these emerging markets through the Belt and Road Initiative, the deployment of the digital yuan, not as the world reserve currency, but as the reserve currency of China's sphere of influence. And they don't have to completely topple the dollar as the global reserve. They just have to significantly undermine it, which they are absolutely doing through Belt and Road. So that's my show for today. This is, I'm going to open up for questions here, and maybe we'll do some Q&A for the next 5 or 10 minutes. But this is kind of strategic level stuff. This is exactly what Xi Jinping wants to happen. He's not hiding it. He's telling these Asian countries very clearly what his vision for this new system is. And historically, like if you go read Graham Allison's book, or you've read anything about the Thucydides trap, 70% of the time when a revisionist power, which China is, challenges a status quo power, which the United States is, 70% of the time that results in war. And when I hear billionaires like Bill Ackman and Ray Dalio, both hedge fund guys, when I hear them talk about this being the start, Ukraine, Russia being the start of World War III, and Ray Dalio talks about the cyclical nature of empires, building on the work of John Glubb, building on the work of Jack Goldstone, Peter Turchin, some of these other guys who talk about historical cycles. By the way, Turchin's got a book called it's called Historical Dynamics. It's a great book. But what Xi Jinping is trying to do here is build unity so that if or when World War III breaks out, China doesn't have enemies on its doorstep, which I do think concerns Xi Jinping greatly. All right, with that, let's get over to some questions. Peter asks, have you gotten with Max yet about the Senkaku Islands? Yeah, listen, if you go to the if you're a Ford Observer subscriber, Peter, I think you are. If you go to the library, we have a snapshot. It's from December. Max did a U.S.-China snapshot. What a war over Taiwan would look like, and that's in the library. You can download it and you can read what Max has on that. Great question. Here, let me see. Let me see what this question is. Would an Asian collective be beneficial if China were to be excluded? I don't think you can exclude China. China has such massive capital markets. They have a ton of influence. They're the largest military in the region. I don't think they could exclude China. I don't think Asian countries could exclude China because there's so much trade reliance. It's not going to be like the Eurozone and Russia, where a majority of the European Union, almost all the EU, cuts ties with Russia. And I just saw, I think it was this morning, that Germany is now saying by the end of this year, they are going to stop all Russian oil purchases. Yeah, listen, there are some, Vietnam still, at least in name, a communist country, although they're kind of like China. They've adopted this kind of capitalist system. Many of the Southeast Asian countries are still, some are still communist. Are they automatically going to fall in line with Xi, or do you think Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia will weigh their options? Okay, if you're a lot of these small countries, you want to be somewhat, I think you want to be somewhat central You don't want to rock the boat just because right now there's still a lot of benefits from being tied to the United States, and there are probably increasing benefits for you not being on the wrong side of China. Maybe eventually this decade they'll have to choose a side. Thailand and the United States, I think we have pretty close. Look, I'm not a Paycom guy, but I think we have like pretty close defense ties, and I want to say even Thailand may be a quote U.S. security partner. So yeah, countries like that, I don't envy the position of countries like that. Considering how deep the ethnic wars run in the Orient, how successful is China really likely to be in a conflict? Well, look, China doesn't want to fight a war right now. That may in 5 or 10. The army says that China will probably achieve military parity with the United States by 2035, maybe 2040. I don't think they want to fight a war right now. If they probably don't want to fight a war at all because the consequences are so great for the Chinese Communist Party. If they were to lose that conflict, by the way, it wouldn't just be United States, China. It'd probably, I mean, it'd be the United States, Japan, South Korea, Australia. I should probably get Max on here to talk a little bit more about this. But it would be not only a multi-domain fight, but it'd also be a coalition fight on the side of the United States. And listen, I said listen again. Sorry. This is the strength of the United States. Not just that we have the largest. Well, we don't have the largest military. Not just that we have one of the most capable militaries in the world. Probably the most capable conventional military in the world for countries our size or near our size. But we can call on international partners, and in many cases they may grumble about it, but sometimes they just move in lockstep. So for these smaller countries, I don't know that maybe we can get Max. This can probably be a high side discussion with Max. Mike, your thoughts on the new Russian missile? It just fear mongering a real threat. So go back to today's early warning high side discussion. I gave my weekly economic outlook in the weekly economic early warning brief today. And on the tail end of that, probably like the last 5 or 10 minutes, Dustin and I discuss, there were some really good questions in there. Dustin and I discuss the risk of not only Ukraine, Russia spilling over into active participation by NATO, but also the possibility that it goes nuclear, as Bush would say. Also the possibility that it goes nuclear. Go check that out. It's like a very, very good 5 to 10 minute talk on that. Let me see. Any other questions here? Cliff brings up the Solomon Islands. Yeah, that's another. Listen, here's what's going on with the Solomon Islands. So they have struck a security partnership in effect, but I've been watching these daily press conferences with the Chinese foreign ministry, and there's actually quite a bit of uncertainty. Quite a bit. The situation's unclear. Not only that, but the Biden administration just sent a diplomatic team to the Solomon Islands. I want to say they left like a couple days ago to go meet with the leaders on the Solomon Islands to see if they can't be talked out of this Chinese security partnership. I don't know. This can be reported in the news in one way because it's what's being reported on the Chinese side and what's being reported on the American side are not the same. And we can probably get Max to maybe Max can do an update for us next week on what's going on with some of these smaller countries in Asia. Since we have offshored many of our manufacturing goods, can you give me some advice on products that would be smart to have on hand as this conflict grows? Well, consumer electronics is by far probably one of the most popular exports from China. Yeah. Okay, here's the thing. Spare parts. Spare parts for everything. Spare parts for automobiles, especially for uh, heavy machinery, industrial equipment, spare parts. Was it last year? I think. Yeah, it was last year. I talked to a friend of mine he's in heavy equipment sales, and this was maybe a year ago. He said a year ago they were having so many jobs that they couldn't do and so many sales they couldn't fulfill because they did not have the parts, and the parts were 6 to 12 months out. So with the Shanghai port shutdown and all the other supply chain disruption that's coming out of China, uh, I would say spare parts is probably the thing. Figure out what you need for like the next at least 6 to 12 months, and stock up if you're going to need that stuff while it's available, because it takes a matter of weeks for these shipping shutdowns in China to finally start to affect the United States. So we should be seeing those effects here pretty soon, and expect them to get worse with these worse shutdown conditions. What about medical production? Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a medical guy. I don't know, but I would say if you can, I don't know. I think alcohol, like rubbing, cleaning alcohol, is probably one of the best things that you can make on your by yourself. But again, I don't know what the production is on that. That's just not a good question for me. Sorry, I'm really not going to be able to answer that question. Mitten Man says heavy equipment is 1 to 2 years out to get. Yeah. So with these further shutdowns, go ahead and extend that. It's probably more than 1 to 2 years now. Corey says he couldn't get oil filters for his car a year ago. Yes. So lots of disruption. All right. We'll maybe do one more question. Everyone, thanks for. Let me see. Oh, here's one other thing. I don't know if this is still going to be the case because Chinese imports are way down right now. But Goldman Sachs came out last week and they started talking about copper shortages. And so if you think about what copper goes into everything: HVAC, plumbing, wiring for a house, all these new builds. If we do have a copper shortage, and I don't think they meant to say it was imminent, but they did. I mean, I pulled up copper prices the other day. I mean, just like all commodities, they're pointing up. And what's going on is the production, the quality of the copper that's being mined out of these Chilean mines are going down in quality. So that's causing some problems. Yeah, Whaler says it's been 6 months to get a shift cable for his son's Honda Accord. Yep, that's globalization. When guys like Larry Fink, who runs BlackRock, when guys like that come out and say, "Yeah, we're probably seeing the end of globalization right now." That's exactly what they're talking about. So many of these companies, they have shot themselves in the foot because when things run smoothly, yeah, globalization can work. And not only can it work, these companies save a massive amount of money. But when things start to break down, especially, Xi Jinping talks about he's against decoupling, and decoupling is what's happening now and will probably continue to happen between the U.S. and Chinese economies. China, they want all that business. They don't want that business to go to Mexico or Panama or Costa Rica or some other Central American country. And one thing I talked about briefly in today's economic early warning is, you remember a time before everything was made in China? It was made in Mexico before that. There are tons of factories in Mexico. Mexico can make a ton of stuff. And, if you're the United States, if you're the Biden administration, let me rephrase this. If you're the Trump administration, bringing back stuff to Mexico is the best thing you can do. It's going to be inflationary. Things are going to cost more money because you're not paying some 11-year-old kid 25 cents a day to make it in China. But nearshoring is, and actually, it's not just Larry Fink. Howard Marks from Oak Tree Capital, who's another hedge fund guy, said there's a trade there. There's probably a lot of money to be made in the near shoring trade, bringing manufacturing back. Yeah, and just okay, this really will be the last thing. On another show, I don't know, like in the past 1 or 2 weeks, I talked about the biggest economic trend right now for China is regionalizing its supply chain as much as possible and localizing their supply chain as much as possible. China is doing this. The United States should absolutely be localizing and regionalizing the supply chain as much as possible, bringing in all this industrial production a lot closer to home, because things are getting a lot worse this decade. And with that, everyone, thanks for watching. We will be back. I will be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time right here on this show. As a reminder, tomorrow will be the last day that I stream this show on this channel. Go ahead over to youtube.com/outfront with Mike Shelby, and I will catch you over there. Starting on Monday, Dustin will be back on the Daily SA right here on this channel. Starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. We'll be in your inboxes before then, and I'll be back on the show at 2 p.m. So until then, everyone, be well and stay out front.